I just watched episode 8 of season 4 of The Boys, and I want to go through this season in general. So big picture, spoilers, little spoilers, everything. We're going to spoil everything that's happened up until and including episode 8 of season 4, which I know at least originally was called Assassination Run. I don't know if it's still called that. That timing is wild. I want to do this a little differently than I usually do these because I think a lot of what is interesting about The Boys this season, and I talked about this in my episode that I put out a couple weeks ago, is it feels more segmented than it usually does. Certain characters were off doing their own thing, and sometimes those plot lines seemed very motivated by, you know, where that character was. Sometimes it felt motivated by plot, and sometimes it kind of felt motivated by, like, obviously he's busy, so we can't have him be here with these guys and stuff like that. I do think a show like this frequently ends up being a victim of its success. Funny enough, not with Anthony Starr, who is, like, I would say the most popular figure on the show. Although I'm sure he's doing well, but the two I would imagine that are toughest to nail down time-wise are Jack Quaid, who's doing Superman show and all kinds of other stuff. Like, he's very busy, and he's good. I like Jack Quaid a lot. And then, of course, Carl Urban, who plays Billy Butcher, who I believe is in the new Mortal Kombat movie. And, like, I'm not sure that those filmed at the same time, but it does feel like certain characters, you know, went off and did their own thing. And, like, part of that, kind of like Stranger Things season 4, seems like it may be motivated by scheduling. Anyway, I just want to talk about how effective every plotline was, what they ended up kind of being about. And I'm going to rank them in order of the ones I thought were the least compelling to the most compelling. So I'm going to go through all the characters. Some will be quicker than others. Start with Ashley. Ashley's whole thing is she's just everything's chaos around her. She's there to, you know, be a mouthpiece for Vought and also make fun of Disney and stuff like that. And I think she does that very well. Her plot lines this season were a little strange. It felt weird how much she kind of kept getting caught up with, like, A-Train. And, like, A-Train was doing his, like, master plan. And not spoilers, and also this is the Boys. I'm going to try to keep this as PG-13 rated as possible so I could still make money off this video. But just in general, it did seem like when A-Train was, like, doing his plan and she was also doing a plan, it was like, well, her plan doesn't matter, does it? I guess this season felt like Ashley's descent into madness, or like, oh, everything's spinning out of control. But that's always been Ashley's vibe. And besides getting Compound B at the very, very end, which I do think is fun and could lead to some interesting places, I just don't think her arc was, you know, super compelling. Also, if it's confusing what I'm doing, my Mortimer is on my lap, and he's decided he has to move around a lot. I'm sure you will see him at some point. So yeah, Ashley, I don't know, least important. I like that character, though. I think she's funny. Next, least compelling one. I think the resolution, everything they got with Frenchie this episode was good. I liked the resolution with him and Kimiko learning that they can't be perfect, and they have to, like, you know, forgive themselves, forgive each other, all that stuff. I do feel like that character has gone through that already. A lot of people pointed this out. Also, especially because making the virus, which was his whole deal in the end of the episode, didn't really amount to anything this season. It might next season, but honestly, it might not. I could see them just going, you know what, that's actually not, like, having a bullet that can kill Homelander seems too convenient. I feel like Kimiko felt like she was a more active part of the plot. I don't know why. I think the thing with me, with Kimmy, the difference between a Kimiko plotline and a Frenchie plotline are following similar routes. Frenchie is very sad and, oh, I'm sad, I'm a killer and that I cannot love myself. Whereas Kimiko has those same thoughts, but are also like dopey grin, you know, kind of fun energy. And also she, you know, has superpowers, which makes her a little bit more interesting to watch. I do think a bit where they fought the multiple mans, which obviously no clip of here, because that is... that just is a bunch of naked guys. But that bit was pretty funny. And I do think Frenchie had some funny moments there. Like, I think he was okay overall this season. This just felt like out of the Boys, he was the weakest one. Next, the same ones I didn't love. I think Neuman's plotline also seemed like it got kind of swept up in everything else that was going on. Partially because of Sage and partially because of just this season clearly leading to where it ended up. And I think, like, a lot of people, including myself, said when this season started, like, oh, we're ending with President Homelander, which isn't technically what we got, but it is what we got. And for that to happen, she had to get pushed out of the way. I do think the alliance between her and Homelander never felt genuine to me, but it never felt like, it just felt like she was just kind of treading water, which she was. But I kind of wish that character was a little bit more active before the very, very end. And I guess she was active during the Tech Night episode where she decided to come in and try to convince everybody to back Homelander. But I don't know. I don't think this character needed a huge presence, but because they were so integral in the political storyline, it would be hard to not put them front and center in a lot of the series. Also, Homelander coming out and saying she was a super, I do think, I guess it's one of those situations where you have a character who's like, just do the thing you're going to do eventually. And I mean, to be fair, there is absolutely no good reason for Neuman to come out as a superhero, specifically because I think if anybody asked her about her superpowers, what would she say? You have the power to control blood. But that doesn't include all the times people's heads mysteriously exploded around me. That must have been a different person. Like, I think Homelander, a lot of the things Homelander did this season felt like they weren't very thought through, which has always been that character's MO, and I think that was good. But especially exposing Victoria on TV in this episode, it's like, dude, it's like, that is not going to work. But like, you can lie and say her power is something different, but at the end of the day, like, this character can't continue in the show if everybody knows they're the superhero who can blow up everybody's heads. Oh, Mortimer's off the lap. Okay, say Ryan this season. So Homelander, Billy, that whole triangle, I liked it. I thought Ryan was pretty good. We've now crossed over from characters I don't think we're doing anything really incredible to characters that I think were working. And I think the Ryan actor, I think his name is Cameron Clovetti, and it might be two. I can't remember if this is a twin situation, but this kid was good, and I think it's funny that his voice was changing at the time that they were recording this. It does feel like they lent into that, which I liked. I liked him doing all the stupid publicity and the, what's the word? Propaganda for Vought. I think that was good. Like, overall, I like the push and pull of him. And I think showing where he ends up at the end of the season, it could feel a little bit contrived, mostly because of whatever her name is. I can't remember her name. The Mallory? No. Mallory? Let's say Mallory. Maybe that's her name. But specifically because of the way Mallory sort of just threw everything at him at the end, which of course was going to overwhelm him and make him do something dumb. And then that was going to cause a whole lot of problems. It did feel like with that character, they had them in a pretty good place. And I don't just mean good place and like good for the character, but I also mean good for the show, like in this conflicted space where it's like, is this kid going to kill Homelander or is he just going to stay with Billy? And I think what we ended up doing with Billy and him, we kind of forced them both in this direction with this bad. Oh, Grace. No, her name was Grace. Mallory was a different person. Maybe there was definitely Grace. We have a Grace in this show. Let's say Grace. Grace, she kind of forced everything in that direction, felt a little convenient just to get him on doing his own thing so you could get Butcher where we needed to put him. I'll say, I think the acting was good. And yeah, I kind of thought that plotline would bug me a little bit more, but I think the interactions between Ryan and Homelander and Ryan and Butcher were all great. And I think that those moments are really important to making Homelander work, which makes the whole show work. So I think overall it was pretty successful. I just think the ending of that was weird. Also, in the same vein, Kessler, I thought all that stuff was kind of dumb in that, like, he's this remnant of the past, very much Butcher's, like, it's not like psychology guy, whatever. But like, he's in Butcher's head. He's the devil on his shoulder saying, kill all the supes are bad, which is what Billy's believed since the beginning of the show. And I think the thing that makes it feel a little frustrating is like this character, especially with all the Ryan stuff, has progressed and got to a point that I think made sense. And putting him back here, I don't know. It feels like we're resetting Billy to season 1 Billy, just because that would be a good Billy to have around for season 5. But I think like looking at because Butcher's been at the like center of a lot of the action in season finales, right? Season 2, everything with Homelander and Becca, that's all very interesting and that gives Billy a lot of choices. I think season 3 finale for Billy was great because it did like force a really difficult choice on Billy that, he didn't want to make, but he had to do. It was really, everything that he had been doing up until that point made sense. Why he would go in to protect his kid, even though he hates Homelander. I just think, this felt like everything was going the way you would want. Everything was going the way you would expect. And the way that this character would behave until the magic tumor just comes out, decides to do all the killings and, reset Billy back to factory settings, which I don't know. I'm not saying I didn't like, because at this point, because Billy was so isolated from the rest of the team, it didn't even really feel like he was a part of the show the same way they did with all these other characters. But when the Butcher plotline was working, the Butcher and Ryan stuff, I think he was good. And I just think, man, Karl Urban is great in this show. And the way that he just does his little smirk and his little, I can't even do it, but he can like knock that face, and he does it in the very end when he says, "You're welcome" to the boys. It's just like he's a pro. He's perfect for this role. I do just kind of wish he was more involved with the boys. Let's say next is Hughie. I think Hughie had a lot of ups and downs this season. I liked Hughie at the end of the season a lot. I think Hughie in episode 8 was great. I think his speech about not being monsters and being, good guys, I think worked. I think everything he was doing with Neuman was good. I think the fight with Starlight and just that, him having to navigate that situation where he's figuring it out as time like passes in real time. He's like, oh, that was the one. Oh, this one I slept with. Oh, that's the one I proposed to. Oh, no. And having to, deal with her. And then when real Starlight comes back, him trying to be like, listen, I don't know if you know, but I didn't know that wasn't you. I think he was good. I think that really worked with Jack Quaid's skill set. I wish the dad plotline didn't feel so disconnected from everything else. I understand thematically what it was supposed to be, and I understand how it can mirror, Homelander and Ryan and Billy and Ryan and this very, very recurring theme of like fathers and, men wanting to live up to their fathers, men not wanting to disappoint their fathers, people being afraid of dying and not being able to let go of that. I just think like getting to where we are, his character grew a little bit, but I wouldn't say this was his big problem before, was like he couldn't let go. He had pretty much completely let go of his relationship with his father. It didn't seem like it was driving him. He, by the end of season 3, I think was mature and was in a place where he could lead the boys and pretty like compassionately deal with the superhero problem. I enjoyed the acting. I like Simon Pegg a lot. I was glad he was in the show. I guess for me, it just didn't feel like the best use of his character. Like if we're writing this show where this is the political intrigue season and we're finding out Sage's master plan and she's playing around with all the pieces and getting the right political actors in their spots, and Hughie's just at the hospital doing the dad plot, it just doesn't feel like it works for me. I also feel like, I understand. I think the stick with the changeling or whatever, the shapeshifter, that worked. I understand people that are saying, hey, feels like we're being a little tough on Hughie in the Tech Night episode. Now, I think the idea of the Tech Night episode is super funny. I think it's like, is a little much for Hughie, but it feels like season 1, The Boys, kind of, not in a bad way either. I like the Tech Night episode because it felt like a very pure distillation of what The Boys is, which is taking a specific superhero, a specific trope, and breaking it down to a point of like parody, but also doing the most over-the-top gross thing with all of Amazon's money to make superheroes look kind of silly and make this whatever, this archetype that they're playing with feel silly. And I think doing that with Batman, doing the, he has a strange sexual relationship with his Robins, but also just that this guy is this, control freak who is also very into, being dominated sexually is funny. And I think that the actor who plays Tech Knight, I loved him. So bummed that character's dead. But like, there's just moments in that episode that I think were pretty funny. But to be like, I just feel like what I would want from this show and what I want from in general, like when Kripke and them talked about Kripke, I don't know how you pronounce his name. When the showrunner was talking about it, doing interviews, I think they kind of didn't, they sold it as like, it's this funny thing. Look, they're doing sex stuff to him. And I think if there was just a little bit more of an, not even acceptance, but just acknowledgement of like how messed up of a situation that was, but like dramaturgically, it just made sense. I don't want them to be like, we're never going to do anything bad to any of our characters. And I think that like, would I expect that moment on every show? No. Does it work on The Boys better than it would most places? Yeah. It's hard to put it into words, except for that didn't feel like the showrunner who was talking about it was like fully aware of like what they were doing to this character and how much people who like this character, and especially, Hughie's always been the victim of, like different. He's always like the normal guy at the center of all this stuff. Putting him in that position, I think, makes sense. Like, honestly, looking back, it feels like something that Frenchie should be doing, except Frenchie's plotline was so dumb this season. Like, I don't even think he was there for that episode. I guess here's my thing. Here's what I'm looking for that episode. Everybody knows Herogasm, the big superhero orgy comic that was an episode of The Boys, a very famous like comic that everyone was like, they're gonna do that eventually, and then they did it in the show. They did it in the same way. It would be fun. It would be silly if, like, you know, I don't know, Spider-Man did sex things, because what are the Spider-Man specifics that you could apply to that, and then it'd be fun. But then I feel like there was just that little extra bit. I remember this really well, where and while they're walking through, someone says like, who are they even sleeping with here? Who's signed up for this? And he's like, it's sex workers who always end up getting the, you know, short end of the stick with this and get abused by the supers. And like, I guess just an acknowledgement of how weird it was to do that to Hughie, or just have Hughie be in on it. You know, why didn't Hughie know? They could, because of course they would have had like stuff on Tech Night. And all right, so Tech Night, we think it's a sex thing. We don't know what kind of sex things. Hughie's, oh, don't worry. We've been around the block. I know what I'm doing. And everybody's like, are you sure, Hughie? Because it might be pretty weird. And he's like, don't worry. I can be trusted. So even if it's like, it's weird, it's like a situation he got into, you know, knowing what he was getting into. I don't know. Anyway, I think Hughie was fine. I like Jack Quaid. I don't think his plotline was incredibly compelling this season. Also, let's point this out here. I forgot to do one for Annie when I was recording this originally, and this is where she would go. I think her plotline in season 4 was kind of all over the place. Seeing her completely undermined made sense, especially because the season ends with her getting it all together. That being said, it wasn't very fun to watch. I think Firecracker being brought in as a ringer specifically to destroy Annie is interesting. And maybe it's just a prisoner of the moment thing, but I think the Annie doppelganger payoff in episode 8 was great. Scenes where Erin got to act against evil Erin, very entertaining. That fight scene and then that acceptance that she doesn't fully know who she is, but she knows who she's not, makes her, I would say, the second most interesting boy to watch this season. If anything, my problem with Annie is that I think her plotline in season 3 was really interesting, with her attempting to bring down the Seven from the inside. And I feel like, especially because of how much her plotline got intertwined with Frenchie's plotline, and how much Hughie was absent for a lot of her plotline, I don't know, it just seemed like it wasn't as important as a lot of other stuff that was going on. But I think the way it ended was great. Okay, let's say MM. I think MM was good this season, Mother's Milk, Lance Alonso's character. Also, a couple people brought up, they said like, he lost a lot of weight, and I had said last time I made a video that was like, he shaved his beard, and everyone was like, is this a different person? I do think part of it is that just if you shave your beard, people think you're a different person. He didn't lose a lot of weight, which is good for him. According to like the interview that I saw where he was talking about it, just see Link was like, yeah, COVID was a lot of eating pizza and stuff. And then I realized I can't get away with that. And so I think that was good. I think he was good in this season. I like that Eminem being in charge of the boys had a directive. It wasn't just he's in charge now, but they're doing the same thing. It was like he's going to try to, you know, work some of the superheroes a little bit differently than Butcher ever would have, where it's not just blackmailing them, it's like appealing to their humanity. I think that was fun. Obviously, you know, a lot of things that worked about him worked about A-Train. I think almost everything MM did I liked. I think he was my favorite member of The Boys this season. And in terms of just watching what this character was up to, I think he was making decisions that were interesting. They felt very informed by everything that he'd done up until this point. I think Laz Lonzo is good. I think he also has a really weird comic booky energy that is fun to see. I think it's very funny that he got caught by Love Sausage again. Just cannot win. Oh, and you know what? Let's say this. I think Sage was okay. I didn't really have any strong feelings about Sage, mostly because I just don't know what, especially at the end when Sage comes in and gives Homelander the balloon and is like, see, we did it. Everything worked out the way I thought it would, and look at what we did, and I'm great. I think for the character like that to work, and for me as an audience member who likes these shows, to care about what happens with them, and to buy them as the world's smartest person, I need a little bit more than just they show up at the end and go, I took a video that you didn't know was being taken, and now we're good. Like, I guess with Sage, what it felt like, we saw Sage say she was the smartest person. And she has those little moments of like, oh, your hair is changing and your prostate is different. Like, you're getting older and that's motivating your I think that was good. I think there were a couple of moments where Sage was like making a plan and it executed in a way that kind of got messed up. But then you can always with that character go, but actually, was what I wanted the whole time. And then it's like, okay, great. So nothing matters. You just show up at the end as long as your guy won. You're like, I wanted them all to do all the things that they did. And then look what happened. I must have been genius. So like, I feel like a character like that, I would need like some sort of, I don't know, like Saw 2-esque kind of montage at the end where we see Sage putting a lot of pieces into play that made a lot of difference in small ways. Like the way I think you would have to do Sage if I was writing this show. And again, I think the show is very fun and I like it a lot. I'm not saying do a better job than writers. You have to start at the end of episode 8 and go, Sage is going to say, I did all that stuff. And then you have to pick like 5 things that she did and you just put them into the show, and they could be as small as, you know, anything, but just her, you know, like secretly being behind a character in a scene, saying something to make them look in a direction to do something they weren't expecting. But we need that scene from the end of Puss in Boots 1 where Humpty Dumpty turns out to have always been in the frame. But just like that, but with more intention. Because this character felt like one of those characters who, no matter what happened, she was going to win. And I think that works as clever. But for a character like this to be a smart plan master manipulator person, I think we needed to see a little bit more of the inner workings. I don't mind that she is just like in it for fun because she's bored. I think that's a pretty interesting like narrative for a character like that. But I just wish there was more going on. It also felt like she was maybe one of the biggest X factors this season. You had like Ryan, obviously there's gonna be some interesting stuff with him. Butcher's going off doing everything with the weird tumor. You have Homelander and Firecracker in this political angle that they're trying to really, you know, maneuver towards Homelander in the White House at the end. But then you have Sage, who's this like, oh, is she good? Is she bad? Is she saying she can't possibly, it can't just be that she's doing everything exactly the way she says she is. And that did turn out to kind of be what it was, where like she would say, I'm here to help you and I'm going to figure out a way. And then like, even when she was getting fired by Homelander, that was all part of her plan. I don't know. I'm not saying it's a bad character. I just think it was a little disappointing because I think a character like that could be really, really interesting. And again, it really just would have needed a flashback to like 3 or 4 things we didn't know they did that it turns out they did. And it can be tiny things, but things where it's like, I knew that Hughie would pick up this thing that we would use to track him, and then that's how this person would find him. Just like stuff like that. I don't know. One thing she'd have to do, she'd have to go to Grace and, you know, somehow seed how dangerous things are to Grace, like have a conversation on the phone next to Grace and be like, yeah, everything's crazy. I'm pretty sure if we don't, Homelander's gonna get everybody. I'm really scared. Just like hiding up the tension so that when Grace goes and does her thing that makes everything worse, Sage can go, see, I was actually part of that. I'm not saying that's a good example of one, but that's how this would work. Okay, so we've gotten through all the boys that I liked. And I think they were all okay. And this is how the show always goes for me, though, because the 7 and the supers are always the more fun part of this show. And I think that was 100% true this year. Everybody except for, like I said, Sage was kind of all over the place. Neuman, I didn't think was great. Neuman was also the farm episode, which did feel kind of isolated and just didn't, I don't know. There was just really important story that was moving forward with Homelander and everybody, especially now knowing nobody's going to have used the superhero virus in that whole season. Knowing that they spent a whole episode just getting it and then not finding it, but secretly getting it. I don't know. Just like, I like to see John Carlos because, you know, I was happy that he was there. But the 7 were the best part of the show, as they always are. I'm going to say right off the bat, New Black Noir is like my favorite new character, I guess. I mean, that's not even true because I love Firecracker. I thought Firecracker was really funny and that actor is putting everything into it. But just in terms of small roles, like this new Black Noir who is the fill-in who won't stop talking and then keeps bugging Homelander, and he's into this in a way that doesn't really make sense. He's a narcoleptic apparently, because apparently the actor is narcoleptic in real life. I just think it was fun. I like the idea that they are replacing this guy with someone who has no idea what any of the stage direction is. He's never done this before. It's all really weird, but he's down because he's hanging with one of the funniest characters on the show, the Deep, who I also love this season. And again, not loved in a way like he's good, but loved in a way like this character is this perfect mix of like all of the annoying traits that a guy like this would have, you know, constantly name dropping like Shia LaBeouf and stuff like that. Those things are so funny. all of his bro conversations, everything with the octopus was great. I think that Chase Crawford is very funny. And I think that this character could have easily been a character that, because they weren't important, because obviously they're not the center of this series and this narrative, they fade into the background. But every time the Deep shows up, I was always like, all right, the scene's going to be funny or weird, killing the writer. It seems like when they write the scenes for the Deep, that's the writers having some fun. And that's where the best jokes are. Easily the best joke of this season was when the Sage broke up with the Deep. And then she also broke up with Black Noir, and it turned out that they had both been sleeping with her secretly because she wasn't telling anybody else, obviously not the other one. And then the Deep said she lobotomized herself to have sex with you. And then Black Noir said, lobotomized herself? That was the funniest laugh. I died. Like Hannah died. Everybody that I saw talking about that week, like that was super funny. Just the idea that he's this stupid pretty boy. I like that he still survived because he's a good enforcer to just have around and cause problems and just be funny to watch. I think I like what they're doing with him for a character that like is incredibly unlikable. But it's like he's so bad that I'm just always excited to see what are they going to do with him this week. Let's say number 3, Firecracker. I think that character is great. The Boys has always been good at this, taking a character like this and having them play a character and then play that character playing a character, right? Because I think base Firecracker, who's just a poor kid who's kind of figured out this way that they can weasel their way into the superhero community and is going to use, QAnon-esque conspiracies to become popular, I think is pretty interesting. I love grifters. I love a good grifter character. And I think I love the gimmick that she doesn't really have superpowers. Like she can do sparklers like Bad Jubilee. Like obviously Jubilee is cool and can do like little nuclear explosions, but she could just do sparklers. So she's just got guns. I think her outfit is fun. I like the way that she forced herself into the narrative. Like again, another character that could have easily fallen into the background because this character had so much ambition. It made them very fun to watch. Obviously what they were doing with Homelander is very funny. I like that they're dying from it secretly. I think there has to be some moment, right? The Boys are going to kill this character by like filling a room she's in with gas or something. And like maybe because she can't smell anymore because her, senses have been destroyed by this breast milk producing hormone that she's taking, she will do one little sparkler and explode herself. Like something fun like that. We have to bring that back. But yeah, I think she was very good. And I think that character was so over the top. When the Boys does decide to do that, when it goes, we're gonna do politics, but we're not just gonna do like a Fox News-ish segment. We're gonna have a Marjorie Taylor Greene getting a Fox News show, and she's going to not look like her, but she's going to be very clearly that in this universe. I think worked really well. I also think that's a good name. Like I like Sister Sage is a fine name. I think that's a good name. But we didn't get too many new supers this season, so I like when they, bring someone in and you're going like, oh, this is supposed to be this character. That's cool. That's this version of Iron Man or whatever. But I do think Firecracker, as the Jubilee of this universe, has a character who is adapted to just being a gun person. I think is great. All right, and then the big two. Who's number 1? Who's number 2? I think number 1 and number 2 are close in terms of the characters that I enjoyed watching the most this season. But I'm going to say, and I could definitely be convinced either way on this, Homelander is number 2. Anthony Starr is great. This character is immensely watchable. Episode, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4, but the one where he goes back to the lab with the Fudgy the Whale cake and then murders everyone and does little kind of almost like Saw, I'm gonna torture you in the way you tortured me, I think was all great. I do think that there's always moments with Homelander where he's with Ryan, and that's why this season the Ryan stuff I think really worked, where like you don't like Homelander. I mean, obviously you enjoy watching Homelander because he's doing a great job, but he'll have a moment with Ryan where he's like, dude, they're just going to tell you to do stuff and you don't want to do it. You don't do it. And you really do get a sense of like, that is the core of this character, is just he hates being controlled and doesn't feel like adequate, but like he does, there's this thing at the back of his mind that's like, I'm not gonna put him through that. Like I think he knows he's a bad person, but I do think he genuinely thinks what he's doing for Ryan is good, and it's just very interesting to see this little origin story episode for him Also, I think his speeches and everything he was doing was great. Also, I do want to give Anthony Starr a ton of credit. Apparently on Gen V, when he shows up for his cameo, they actually had him really high up and had him like land, but on the show they don't do that. He just like plumps, and like they do that. I'm assuming what they do is they have him jump in the air and then land, and they edit it in a way that's clever. But with this, they like had him on like a big wire, and you could, it's so funny because you can watch it and he's just cursing the whole way up because he just hates it, and it would be awful. But he's just good. He's great at his job. I understand why people want him to play other superheroes, but I'm with him on this one, man. Just don't do more. You did one great. Do other stuff. Take all this money and, do whatever you want to do. But like, it does seem like these roles, the exercise and all that takes a lot out of you. And I don't think, like, as much fun as it would be for him to be Booster Gold or whatever, I'm fine with him just taking some time. And I'm excited for President Homelander because I knew that was where this was going, and I think that's the logical endgame for season 4. And I do like, speaking of endgame, how this is kind of the Infinity War ending of the boys, where like everybody's lost and the bad guys have everything they need, and now we really get to see the boys like figure out a way out. I think that's very compelling. What else? I don't know. I think I liked watching Homelander talking with Sage, plainclothes Homelander. That scene was very interesting, and I do like that this character thinks he knows what he's doing, but very frequently characters will challenge him, like the moment in Tech Night where they're like, okay, but what's your plan for like oil production and stuff? Or when Sage kind of gets him on like, you shouldn't do that because it's a bad idea. And he's just like, you know what? I don't care. I'm not doing it. I guess what I like about his character, and what I think is interesting to watch, is that it feels very natural. This, impetuousness, this self-destructive behavior. And this character, I think frequently, and Stan Edgar was great at this, and I'm sure he'll do something like this in the 5th season, like dresses him down and it's like, you are not good. Like, you think you're cool, but you don't get it. And maybe you are clever enough to like usurp me, but what are you going to do next? And I always love to see a character like this, dog catch the car, and then what? And so I like watching him both succeed, make things worse for the boys, but also get to the top and go, oh wait, I don't have a plan for this, and I'm surrounded by idiots and sycophants, and my girlfriend who's dying from the disease caused by the breast milk hormone that she got for me, and that's just real funny. But yeah, MVP this season was A-Train. I think that plotline was great. I think that Jesse T. Usher, has been good. I've liked him on this show. I think the show understood, because I think he started in a similar place to the Deep. They were both around the same level. And even like up until season 3, there were moments where it would be like Homelander and then the Deep and A-Train. And the Deep, 100% one note, just kind of a coward who wants to be respected and, just cannot do that. But doesn't want to be, would like to be respected, but really just wants to be, feared. And there's a lot of problems with him. But I do think that A-Train has had a really interesting arc, especially considering that back in the beginning of the show, like, he's the show. He shows up and kills whatever the girlfriend's name is. I can't even remember. It's been so long. And that sets all of this into motion. And I think it feels very deliberate compared to some other characters who I think have kind of been jogging in place. A-Train feels like it has been going forward, or end of season 1, he fights Annie, but they save his life, and he's kind of conflicted, and then he's kind of helping them, and then he's trying to do a social justice thing, which I thought was hilarious in season 3, but he's also like actually fighting villains. I can't remember what his name was, but that one gun guy who sucked, and A-Train killing him, I think was a great moment. To this season actually being like the only, I guess, besides Annie and Kimiko, although Kimiko is like her own thing. She's not really a superhero. She's like a secret agent guy, but like in terms of the actual superheroes in the show acting like superheroes, giving him that arc from being the one who does the original murder to showing up and helping everybody and feeling real conflicted, but then like getting it. And I'm really glad he didn't die this season. I think having a speedster around is really handy. And there's certain pieces of the season 5 where you're like, oh, that guy's in jail, that guy's in jail, that guy's in jail. They can't call him. Like, one of the things that I think they have done well is every season the boys make a new friend, pretty much, who is their like, new superhero friend. I think Maeve, you could say, was last season. Maybe Maeve was also season 2. And you have A-Train, obviously. I mean, you got Soldier Boy, but he's not really a friend. But I guess when there is the uprising and the supers fight the supers. Like, it's going to be good the same way that it was with Maeve last season. And it's always been with Maeve, but with A-Train now, it's going to be really satisfying seeing him probably kill the Deep because they're kind of on the same level, or sacrifice himself to, you know, hurt Homelander or something in a way that you're like, this show, if you just watch this show from his perspective, totally works. I think he's funny. I think his reactions are good. Yeah, I think what they did with A-Train is fun and smart. And like feels more like one of the things that I think the show does well is take an idea from the comics that's not really, you know, they don't really do anything with it and expand it on it in a way that is pretty compelling. And like A-Train, the character had nothing going on, but taking him and like starting with, he's just a guy who runs, who keeps getting caught in everybody's schemes, like he's delivering stuff and accidentally kills someone and is forced to face the consequences of that. I think like his growth and having that be a character arc for one of these guys is collateral damage coming back to haunt you, changing the way you think about everything. And then eventually you get forgiven by that character and then you're on the good guy team. Like, I don't know. I thought it was great. So I think there were parts of the season that really worked. Honestly, I think the parts that I wasn't as big of a fan of was a lot of the boys stuff. Because I always like watching the Seven more. I like watching their ice capades. I like watching all their weird parodies. I think they're all hilarious. I like watching, you know, Firecracker and the Deep sing a song, like stuff like that. I'll never get tired of. And like all the Vought Plus jokes. I think it's so funny that they had the thing about, oh, we reshot the movie. It's the most expensive movie ever made, so it's got to be good, right? Like that's really funny. And now they're shelving it for tax reasons, which is really funny. Like I don't know. I know that stuff is kind of low hanging fruit, where it's like they're gonna make a movie and then shelve it for tax reasons, you know, like HBO did. But just seeing them say that is funny to me. I think there's something about taking this big budget show. It's almost like SNL does this sometimes, where you're just like, listen, it's not that funny, but getting, you know, the actual Jake Gyllenhaal and having him do it is kind of funny, because it's like, man, that's Jake Gyllenhaal. It's kind of like that here, where they're just like a fake news report that's just, you know, about superheroes being, you know, MAGA or whatever. That's fine, but they do it so well in a way that nobody else could, and no other show really is. So I really appreciate the boys. I think they've got some stuff they got to work out. I think this next season, season 5, is obviously the last season, so I hope that it all gets figured out. You know, I think a lot of the sexual assault stuff this season was weird. Handled in a weird way. Some better than others. Some seemed like more, you know, thought out than others. Other small things. I like the shapeshifter that rips their skin off. I think that's fun. That's interesting. That's one thing I didn't see, because I will watch most of the stuff on the show because it looks so silly and stupid. The one thing I did not watch was Sage actually getting lobotomized, but that is an idea is funny. The bit where she's giving thumbs up to Neuman and doing like the wink kind of, you know, back and forth is pretty funny. Yeah, it's gonna be hard for me to beat the ice capades in episode 3, I think, about the war on Christmas as like a favorite moment of this season. I do think the fight in the boys' like home base between them and New Black Noir and a Neo Noir, as I've heard people call him, which I think is funny, and the Deep is a pretty funny fight, and I think was kind of cool. But yeah, I think the show is creative. I'm really glad the show exists. I know it's not like a good show. I think there's some really good performances in here, and I think they're using it to do good things. I'm very kind of proud of the show for being so unapologetically like political, not in a way that I'm like, wow, they're really saying something important, but just in a way where like the people that never were able to see what Homelander was and like would think Homelander is cool now cannot ignore it. Like, I like that they went, all right, well, like we're gonna show you. He's gonna say, hi, I'm Homelander, this is Fox News, do you get it now? I appreciate that, because yeah, I've always hated, you know, like a lot of that stuff, like a character, their symbol will get co-opted in a way that just is so annoying. The Punisher is always the big example of the Punisher logo on like cops, like patches or whatever, and like cop cars, and you're just like, man, how many times do they have to write a comic book where the Punisher looks at the comic book and goes, hey, I don't like cops, I'm not a cop, I'm different than cops, like you shouldn't like me, you should like Captain America. I like when a story is able to, without just specifically doing that, like take a character that is so clearly a symbol for something and just make it so obvious you can't ignore it. So I do appreciate that. I think the show looked great. Ripping Spider-Man in half, all that stuff looked really cool. Because it's a good show, and they got a lot of money, and I appreciate it. Got one more season. It'll probably be in 2026, so, I'm looking forward to it. I'm not sure what the deal is going to be with Gen V, and honestly, it feels like what they've set up with those characters beyond any of the other things that will, I'm sure, change how they were planning for the season. I don't know what to expect with that. I'd be fine with no more Gen V. I'd be fine with a Firecracker show or just taking some other character and giving them a spinoff, because I think those are fun. But I think overall Gen V was I like Gen V, but I'd be okay with some of these being one season and just taking a character and doing, their story or part of the world and doing that story. I think that would be fun. Anyway, thank you for watching. This is a season of television. We got done with it, and I appreciate it. Thank you all for staying around. And I'll do more videos like this soon for other shows like Agatha when that comes out very soon. So we'll talk later. Stay safe, everybody. I'll see you soon.